Hey everyone, welcome back to another podcast adventure. My name is Midnight Mike. I'm joined by Joe.
I'm here.
And we got Ryan Burns on the show. Yeah, absolutely, he's right over there.
Hello! Whoop. I'm here too.
Yes, Ryan is there. I contacted Ryan, a few weeks ago to try to get him on the show. He runs the HEROparanormal podcast. He's the host over there. He's also an author of the Utah UFO Ranch, Shapeshifter Territory, and is just a wealth of knowledge. I listened to one of your most recent podcasts about UAPs, but I invited you on to talk about Skinwalker Ranch and some cryptozoological stuff and just paranormal stuff in general, because you seem to be like the guy who's got boots on the grounds there, since you live in Utah, don't you?
Somewhat. I'm there. I'm there monthly, but I'm there about a week out of every month.
That's living there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Vacation there. With the hype around Skinwalker Ranch recently, especially because of the History Channel show, which I watch as soon as it comes out. There's been a lot of hype around it. A lot of eyes on Skinwalker Ranch. Are you keeping up to date with that series?
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool that the area is getting some attention. I mean, it's something I've dedicated like a lot of my life to. So to see it getting some attention it's pretty satisfying for me.
You've been there, you've been at least around the ranch. You've been fairly closer than probably anybody listening to this podcast has been. Can you tell us some of your experiences there that really stand out in your mind?
Yeah, the place is epic. It really is the way the show kind of describes it, is kind of a Badlands feeling to it, a serenity, kind of a rugged beauty, like not a beauty that, you would say like, oh, wow, I want to take, a camp with the family there. But it's a very rugged beauty. And there's an energy that can be felt almost immediately, in my opinion. In this UFO corridor, if you want to call it that, or this ridgeline system, this valley, this watershed. There's a lot of things involved, and even the power lines. I think, there's a lot of speculation, but I think that's involved too. And yeah, some of the crazier stuff, man. I've seen stuff that I swore was military. I have had experiences there that are beyond spiritual, beyond anything I've ever felt in a church. And it's also kind of like one of those hobbies that you don't really get burned out on. It just kind of grows. So it's an interesting dilemma. I've seen probably from the military aspect, one of the weirder things, I was with another researcher. It was like a green laser grid that looked like it was coming from an indiscriminate point in the sky coming down towards us. We were on the ridge system, and it was coming down, and it just looked like a grid, like a checkerboard, like something you would consider like a Skynet coming straight down on us. So we ducked and got down in the sagebrush. I remember I was like breathing in dust. We were not moving because we could see this like grid system moving and like measuring and mapping out this otherwise area where there's nothing. There's really nothing there. And then all of a sudden you have this what looks like an intelligent force gridding or mapping out an area. So that was pretty spooky. And I mean, there's tons of stuff. There's so many things.
I became obsessed with Skinwalker Ranch. I heard about it. I grew up listening to Art Bell and George Norrie, but I hadn't read the Hunt for Skinwalker book put out by George Knapp. After I read that, I became obsessed, started digging through everything that I could, and just the stories that are involved with the weird cryptozoological creatures, ranging from dogmen to Bigfoot to creatures that haven't existed for 10,000 years appearing on this ranch. It just drew me in because it's got a little bit of everything for everyone when it comes to the paranormal or conspiracies when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch. Have you personally witnessed any cryptozoological creatures there?
Yeah, I've seen some things that looked somewhat prehistoric, other things that just don't match. A lot of canines that look like they they shouldn't be there. They look necrotic almost. You get these feral packs of what we call res dogs, which are almost surreal and paranormal in and of themselves because it's such a harsh climate and environment. And you get these animals that either get abandoned or thrown out, and they pack up. And a lot of them are, the meanest, pit bulls, mastiffs, all kinds of cattle breeds involved. And you end up with this strange mix of like these awesome feral canines that are roaming this landscape that, in my opinion, if I was a coyote, I wouldn't want to come up on. And there's some video of these things out there. A very famous video where everybody's claiming it's a skinwalker is by Cody Tabee, who is he's a tribal member. And I've been out on investigations with him, and he's a legit guy. He's a stand-up guy. He was working, I believe, for the Indian Affairs Wildlife Service at the time. And they just saw this thing that looked like, whoa. And I think he did a pretty good job with a cell phone of getting footage of it. And it's just this huge mastiff-like. A lot of people think it looks like a cat. Others think it looks like a massive dog. Some think it looks like something else. And we really don't know what it is, but it's probably just one of these feral wild animals.
In one of the more recent episodes of the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, they brought out some llamas, put them in a pen, almost as kind of bait to see if a new entity or a new life form on the ranch would provoke something. And sure enough, it did. They caught this grainy video of a couple llamas being attacked by something. And these llamas were protected by a fence, but not like it wasn't impenetrable. And they were being attacked by something that lunged at them and just tore them to shreds. It could have been like those pack of dogs. We really don't know. It's scary. And like when it comes to like what exactly is going on at Skinwalker, it appears everything is going on. In this most recent series, they're doing a series of tests to figure out where some of this weird radiation is coming from. Where is it emanating from the ground? Is it coming from the sky? And they seem just perplexed. And I don't know if you can speak to this or have any sort of knowledge, but all the research that the Bigelow group did and NIDS did, they had research that they just haven't released yet. Do you know what they were releasing or any of their findings may have been?
I can't speak to any of that. I can't speak to any of that. I can speak to the fact that some things have been wildly exaggerated and other things have not really seen the light of day. It's all classified. And they really did their best, I think, to, in that era, because it's not the same as today. I think Mr. Fugel is doing the same in a different era, hitting the ground running. So I do know that Mr. Bigelow in that era did things that were completely outside of the box and visionary for the time period. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting experiments, and that's these tricksters in the paranormal. That's what interests them. And I always kind of liken it to, I was a fly fishing guide for many years. And before all this, that was my career. And I always liken it to basically, it's like fishing. Like you throw it out and you either get a result or not as the observer or the one hunting the trickster. And they like things that are out of the box. They like neat, new, and interesting.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the missing 411 phenomenon with David Paulides. I'm suspecting you're probably well aware of it. But it seems to me like whatever is going on at Skinwalker Ranch, there could be some parallel, or whatever entities are involved with Skinwalker Ranch could also be involved with missing 411. Have you made any parallels to that at all?
The cave system. And this is an interesting thing. You guys are going to get some of the most interesting explanation of some like stuff I haven't come out with yet. First, you guys are getting it first.
Awesome.
So, there apparently, according to the show, and according to many of the excursions that myself and Mr. Ryan Skinner, Dave Rosenfeld, and many other researchers have gone on in the past, and this is years ago. Many of these caves have fallen in because they're made of, you kind of saw the structure of the rock. It's very unsteady and dangerous. So recommend everybody stay out of these things, first of all, because I mean, it's just rocks on rocks on rocks. However, they tend to lead to one another and have air pockets and ventilation going. And so there's wind traveling through these tunnels is what I'm trying to say. So I think they lead to something. I don't know what they lead to, but there's some reality to that. And I recently watched the Hellier film in its entirety. Being on quarantine, not much to do. I'm like, I really don't like TV, so I'm trying to look for something that I haven't got into yet. And I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's a pretty good series.
Yes.
Great. And, that led me to buy some of the books that were mentioned in the series. And I liked how the series went into tunnel systems, this, that, the other thing. Similar magic or coincidental synchronicities that seem to have a pattern.
Yes.
And is basically like, for those who haven't seen it, that's the sum up of the paranormal, the trickster in the paranormal, or at least somewhat in the first. It's a really great series. Everybody should watch it. I'm summing it up horribly. But so the fact is, I bought all these books. And the first book I bought was a book called The Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts. And I immediately, at the beginning of the book, it lists 10 people who influenced the book. And I immediately noticed one person who created this like rare, undisclosed, very few people know of this like secretive, like divine way of living type pattern thing that he made. Not very well-known person. I'm super into him. I think he's one of the coolest guys ever. And he was involved with Rosicrucianism, best friends with Abraham Lincoln. Really cool guy, black guy, really neat stuff. So he's in there. So all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that's a coincidence. Nobody knows about this guy. It's in the book. So second coincidence, I noticed that it has George Van Tassel, who is the grandfather or great-grandfather, I believe it's grandfather of Ashley Van Tassel, who is Ryan Skinner's girlfriend. So there's another strange coincidence. I haven't even talked to Ryan about this yet. So that's strange. Well, I'm reading on and I noticed that George Van Tassel made this really cool device that was supposed to like have dimensional characteristics, and it was funded by Howard Hughes. And my wife is director for residential real estate at Howard Hughes. So I'm like, okay, I give up. So I called the guys that did Hellier, and I'm like, dude. And they're like, oh yeah, this happens all the time. So the trickster and the paranormal is very common, but in this area of the UFO corridor, Shapeshifter Territory, these different ranches, what is kind of a joke, and you kind of see this in some of the interactions with some of the individuals on the show, that, hey, it's just kind of what the ranch does, or it's just kind of what the area does. And that's kind of how it is. It's like after being in the area a while, you don't question it. It's just how it is. So if there's a lot of strange coincidences in a row, you either engage or ignore.
I see. I'm on board with you 100% with a lot of stuff. My co-host Joe, he dips his toes in, like he indulges in my UFO talk and weird theories. Like my theory for missing 411 and people go missing is kind of like a trickster, but it's a non-linear entity that uses the coincidences in your life to decide whether or not it wants to do something with you. Because it's already happened to them because they're non-linear. And it uses coincidences as a notification system to then decide if they want to take you, hold you, or release you at some point in time. But that's a whole different type of conversation there.
The missing 411 stuff is just kind of all over the map, and a lot of it is so anecdotal. I'm a big proponent for video evidence. I'd love to see it. Photographic evidence, stuff like that. That Bigfoot with no tits, or has tits. I don't know. It's just that Loch Ness was proved wrong, I think, years later. I can't remember. But yeah, the Skinwalker stuff, I've definitely heard a lot more about. Like people from all sides. I think even Joe Rogan recently mentioned that Skinwalker Ranch is. He's talked to people who have seen some crazy stuff there.
It seems like with all the attention on it now, and same with the USS Nimitz and all the Navy encounters, because you usually can't separate them because that got released. Those documents tied back to ATIP and Bass, and that group was being funded, or that funds are being diverted to the Bigelow Group. So they're really tied together with the public awareness on UFOs now, and even Skinwalker Ranch. You think that there possibly could be some media manipulation in this, meaning that they could turn the UFO subject in Skinwalker Ranch into something that is very deadly, and therefore we need to gear up and weaponize it or create a space force against it?
I seriously, I believe that there's serious potential for that area. In fact, when I heard it changed hands, I took like a huge gasp, because you want to make sure that it's in the right hands. And I probably didn't give the guy a fair shot, because it is such a delicate area. And I do think we have the correct ownership. I think Mr. Fugel is the correct ownership at this point in time. And it is something he's passionate about. And honestly, with all of the Nimitz stuff, the Space Force stuff, I don't know if you guys heard about the Space Force officer who was found dead in his home.
No, we did not.
Guy. So they had a guy come out, unfold the Space Force flag. I believe he was the only Space Force officer. And I could be mistaken on that. There may have been two. But he was found dead in his home. And the first thing I thought is, like, go Space Force. Like, what does this mean? Like, he won't be back in time. This mission's going to take too long. Like, my mind went so far, so fast that, we're just going to pronounce this guy dead now. And I don't know, way conspiracy minded, so I probably jumped the gun. But I do think that it's odd how these coincidences and synchronicities mount up in these areas to a degree that mathematically the math doesn't lie. For example, we've done a lot of strange things in an area nearby, and we've started using a lot of quantum random number generation. The interesting thing is, first we were just cameras. I just put cameras everywhere, and that was great. We caught some stuff. I saw some neat things, but then I realized that as I started taking down cameras, more was happening. So the question of minimization came up, and that's kind of a minimalistic practice is kind of what I'm doing now, but I'll probably go back with all the cameras. There's still a lot of cameras out there, but it's hard to decide which direction to go, because a lot of these entities, they want something that will entertain them, but not something that will hurt them. For example, in the previous Bigelow era, there were these large posts that are actually present on the TV show. You've probably seen them. They look like the top of a pirate ship. It looks like a freaking telephone post with a scaffold or a place to stand or put something there high up on the top. And they're kind of like falling over like the Leaning Tower of Pisa at this point. But in those posts, at the top of those posts, they had, to give you an example, they had aquariums with children's toys that toddlers would play with in an aquarium, bolted or glued to the top of this 35, 45-foot post, inaccessible other than, I don't know, flying or jumping. And that's what they had to entice the trickster. That was one of the stranger, at least that I thought, that you can still see remnants of in the TV show. So that was back then. Just imagine the things that they're probably not even putting in the TV show is the other thing that I've coincidentally thought. Maybe they are putting everything. I don't know. I have no place to speculate. I have no place to talk. I know that a lot of the experiments they're conducting probably take years, and they're expected to put it into a TV show and edit it down into a very small portion of time, and people are judging it very harshly on all, every facet. And it's very difficult. It's a difficult thing. It's some of the larger questions that humanity has to face. And these are very difficult science experiments. And then to be able to also put them in the TV format, I don't know how I could do it. I think that they're doing quite the juggling trick, and hats off for that.
I love talking about this stuff, and like every word you say, like I'm right on board. But you have to have people in your life that they know what you do. They don't understand it. How do you explain, or do you even try to convince anybody about the possible realities that are out there? Do you even bother with it anymore, or you just say, I can't convince anybody?
Right. It's a minimal. I think the less you try to convince, the more people get interested. And they get interested for the reasons that you've mentioned, like the in the media, the Nimitz, the realities that are coming forth, not only scientifically, the proof of possible wormholes, the speculation that we're dealing with alien artificial intelligence, or possibly even, if you want to go there, it always goes the spiritual route eventually. And that's very interesting, that if you stick with it, eventually it's going to lead kind of to the same ugly places. A lot of those rabbit holes people don't want to climb down. And there is the possibility that we have these, for lack of a better word, entities coming through these routes or portals. I hate to use that word because everybody's using it. And they have abilities that we don't have.
I like, so you've been to the ranch, you've taken cameras out there trying to document as much as possible. I'm wondering if you've ever taken a group or been a part of a group that's been out there that you've just sat near the property and decided to meditate, and if that provoked a reaction.
I haven't done it with a group, and but I have done it by myself, and that I haven't done it since. It was life-changing. Completely life-changing. I ended up purchasing a property over it, saw all kinds of future events and these strange, the way I could explain it is, have you seen Interstellar?
I have.
Those windows sort of a thing. Yeah, like these strange cloud-like entities in the sky that, for lack of a better word, it's like a kid looking at, hey, that looks like that looks like a dog man. You're like, wait a minute, and it's not moving and it's not blowing away and it's sitting there. Strange stuff like that, but lower than cloud level. Interesting things that are hard to explain. But yeah, the meditation aspect is, there's definitely a way to make contact in the area.
And the reason why I brought that up is because there's a chapter in the Hunt for Skinwalker book where somebody asked for permission to go on the Gorman's Ranch and just to meditate. So they take him to a clearing. He begins to meditate, and out of the woods, according to the witnesses, a translucent predator-like creature comes out, screams in the guy's face. The guy who's doing the meditation gets scared shitless and gets the hell out of there. I was just wondering if you've had a reaction like that. It sounds like you had a much more pleasant experience.
Well, I think the transitional part is, the beginning is the hard part. So what I did is, it was a strange experience altogether. I was leaving an area close to the corridor there, or right there. And I was driving home. I saw a large wolf-like creature in the middle of the road sitting there. And it had one eye. And as I pulled my huge truck up next to it, like, move, it just wasn't moving. And I realized this truck's pretty big and that dog's pretty big. And I got out of the vehicle and stepped towards it. And as I got very close to it, I started to realize, like, this creature is probably very capable of hurting me. But it seemed very noble. It seemed very, very almost spiritual. And as I got really close to it, I got like a strange, like a voice in my head that said, go back to where you were. We're not done yet. And I jumped back in the truck and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm here for. So turned back around, went right back to where I was. And instead of just sitting there, I laid back, and it was kind of a swampy area, to be honest with you. So I just laid back in this like wet, at the time of year, very wet, kind of hidden wooded area. And what took place, I kept wanting to open my eyes, but it was such an interesting messages coming through, or basically kind of like Interstellar. I was just seeing like these reflections of myself in the future and the past, like you guys were talking about, very, very similar things to what you were talking about.
In one of your more recent YouTube videos, I think you put it out about a week ago. Just you're talking about some anomalies that were going on in and around the area, and you talk about a flying refrigerator kind of UFO. And it kind of sounds ridiculous, but it's talked about in the Hunt for Skinwalker book. You've seen it. It's such a peculiar object. It's like a flying refrigerator. It looks nothing like what people think a UFO is, like a saucer. Well, do you have any idea what the hell that is, or why a refrigerator?
Yeah, I'm so glad that the Tesla Cybertruck came out, because now I kind of describe it as sort of like a Tesla Cybertruck flying with a single headlight in the front and an LED strip in the back, but more refrigerator shaped, like you're saying, but that stainless look. And I can't help but think that's ours, with that really cool tail light in the back. I don't know, but it looked really cool. I've paid a lot in taxes. I can only dream that it's going to something like that. Probably just going to roads and potholes, but who knows?
It seems like the Skinwalker Ranch in places like this is just like a Walmart for paranormal activity. You get Bigfoot, you get UFOs, you get portals, you get poltergeists, and that's the area where they decide to enter in through at least one of them into our reality and in interface with us. In one of the more recent episodes of the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, they have a video of this cow who wasn't mutilated, was killed. And a UFO hovering over it, or at least a black object. You have any speculation on what the cattle mutilation phenomenon is and why?
It gets so weird so fast with
I love
the cattle meat. I'm gonna leave that to the experts, because I went as deep as the prions, following Colm Keller, and the whole prion thing is really scary, and you really need a degree and more brain power than I have to get into that. But it is a very accurately studied and real phenomenon that is taking place.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely taking place. It just seems like there are different entities, at least to me. You can correct me, you have your own opinion, obviously, but it seems like there's different entities at Skinwalker Ranch with different agendas. Or can you lump it all together and say all of the phenomena we're experiencing there is all a trickster or a jinn?
The jinn is such a cool term. It is an assessment that was made, long before our time by mankind, and it's one that if you can look past any of the religious baggage that comes with the jinn, it is it's exactly like what we picture a trickster to be, like the ideal trickster, something that is not only a trickster, he's not only good, but he's good at what he does, and he's not only bad, but he's still good at what he does. And is it, they're mentioned more or less in the Bible if you consider bridges through translation into the Elohim and other characters and godlike creatures with a small g that had abilities that human beings didn't have.
So you've been out there a bunch. You've basically, after your meditation, you changed your life course a little bit. Have any of these paranormal experiences followed you home and impacted your personal life?
Absolutely. And it is it's something I kind of just blow off, but it's something I notice people around me see, and it is interesting stuff. But what I notice is it will grow as much. It's like a chia pet. If you quit feeding it, it'll die. And if you aren't surprised, aren't astounded, don't look into it. You're like, yeah, I know you're there. And I got things to do. I'll be back later. It's it's one of those things. It's very interesting. I agree with you. I believe there are entities, because many of the manifestations are so different and varied in their appearance to us that you only can imagine that there are various entities that are involved with this reality, or at least can be accessed or called upon at any time. I don't know why they seem to be so drawn to that area. Mankind's talked about this for millennia, that entities are around us at all times. But in the Shapeshifter corridor, the UFO corridor, that Shapeshifter territory around that whatever you want to call it, the Uinta Basin, basically, that 80 square mile dinosaur diamond is truly paranormal.
It's fascinating because, if there are different entities there, they have an agenda. And one of those agendas, Joe, is is that they don't want people digging anywhere near the ranch. And one of the things that I've kind of wondered, especially if you look at fairy folk and fairy lore, is that a human should ask permission to do certain things. And it seems like the Gormans and even some of the tests they've done since, it doesn't seem as though they have asked permission to dig on the land. They continue to do so and suffer some repercussions, whether it's not swelling of the head, missing tools, things being ripped apart. I'm not sure. Have you decided to ask or asked permission to do anything there, like out in the open, or you just kind of do your own thing?
I own a lot of property in the area, and it nearby. Let's put it that way. And it is just throughout the basin. And I've had experiences that can only be, and the strange thing, they used to just happen to myself. And then much like fly fishing, I noticed that it was just happening to the people I was with at the time. And they were noticing it. And I was getting more enjoyment off seeing other people enjoy and interact with this phenomena than I was actually, I believe it's true. I don't need any more proof. But seeing other people's eyes open to it, you realize that there is a very real essence, almost hiding in the shadows in plain daylight up there and all over the place at night, that is able to do things. For example, I had a gentleman, a friend of mine, who he's a veteran that wanted to come up and check the place out after I purchased some property that I thought was interesting. And he came out with me. He'd waited a while to come out. And when he came out, we were chatting. We walked a certain direction. When we came back about a half an hour later, walking the same exact way, there's a deer leg there. And there's no blood anywhere. There's no tracks anywhere. There's just a severed deer leg right on the path where we had walked. And he looked at me and he goes, "You got to be kidding me." And I said, "I don't know what it is." And he said, "There's no explanation for this." And I go, "Weird, right?" And that's just kind of how it is. You can't expect it all to be paranormal, but if you jot it all down and try to keep a record of it, you can go back and try to pick the ones that for sure can't be debunked. And those, I think that's what everybody's trying to do, and the show's doing a good job of. I think a lot of people are putting a lot of time and man hours into this, and it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's good that they're trying to cross their T's and dot their I's with being as thorough as possible with their measurements and documenting everything, because they don't want to come off like a crackpot. For instance, a personal story I have that maybe you can have an opinion on. I have this memory. I was about maybe 5 to 7 years old. I have this memory of being strapped down to a table, kind of like an X, and this person was behind me to my left-hand side. I got my left leg out of the binds and kicked back at him. I remember feeling a lot of gratitude of being able to strike back at this person. Then they calmly tied my leg back down, and that's all I remember of the memory. To me, it doesn't seem like a dream. It's dreams to me are much more slow moving and not in. It's almost like you're molasses. This feels like a real memory. Have you heard of anybody else going through a situation like that?
Yes. A lot of people, whether they're camping at the Bottle Hollow campground, whether they're anywhere in the Uinta Basin in any of the designated camp spots or badlands or horse fields, there's all kinds of places and areas that are nearby. When a lot of folks, their first night in the area, they have dreams that you would expect. I can only describe as very lucid. So that's very common and hard to explain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm debating whether or not to do some hypnotic regression, but as you go knocking on this stuff, it'll stare right back at you. So I might just let sleeping dogs lie at that point. You deal with this, you research this. This has become your life. Is your is your wife on board with this stuff, or does she kind of let you do your own thing?
Yeah, it at first she's like, "Wow, this is a thing," and I was like, "Yeah, this is a thing." And then she was like, "Oh wow, this is a thing," and I'm seeing you're like really into it. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty into it." And then she started to witness, I guess, a lot of these synchronicities or coincidences that are mentioned by those who talk to me about it. You know, she's overhearing phone calls and such. And she started to notice a lot of these synchronicities and coincidences in her own life after finding out about my involvement with it. So I think that was enough for her to say, okay, that's a real thing. It's not for me, but he's obviously got a grasp of this and hasn't destroyed him yet. But it's, you know, probably not the healthiest hobby.
Do you consider coincidences to mean that you're kind of on the right path?
I sort of do. I kind of take them to mean like it's a double shift, maybe like if you're at work or something. I don't know, like you're covering some ground quicker than expected, and you're seeing that flash of a frame or whatever it is. And maybe you're on the right track. Maybe it's all, you know, I don't claim to know exactly what it's all about, but to me personally, I do kind of take it as a paranormal tap on the shoulder that, hey, it's okay. And not only that, the paranormal in general, things like that, like deja vu and other things like that, when people have these lucid dreams or out of body experiences, astral projection, things of that nature, I find these to be a magical tap on the shoulder of like spiritually reminding us that we are not only bound by the things that we have decided are important, but we are bound by a whole other rule of laws that a lot of us may have lost track of.
Well, Joe's the kind of like the more skeptical one here. I'm wondering if Joe, if he just chalks coincidences up to just what they are, random kind of events, or do you think that there's something more to it?
I mean, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. A lot of times it's anecdotal stuff. It'll be written in a book and there will be no evidence. But then I think there's other times where it's, you know, you feel like the source is absolutely credible. And so you do have a little more confidence in what you're hearing. But I think it's easy for people to, I mean, this one's for Joe in the YouTube chat. I didn't bring up politics, but think about the Jussie Smollett thing. Like people can just literally make things up and people will believe it. So, you know, and I think David Icke is one of these guys who does a lot of this stuff. He talks about all these things and you're just like, yes, David Icke, lizards, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So I think there's some of this going on. But for sure, I'm not a coincidence theorist at any stretch. I think sometimes when they pile up so much, you're gonna have to start asking questions.
Yeah, like for instance, we've been asking for signs on what we should do. You know, if we're making the right choice, and like when it comes to like moving, finding jobs, and then I live in Arizona, Phoenix, and my backyard flooded, and then the next day the washing machine stopped, leaving water there, and then because the motor burned out, and then spontaneously I decided to check it in, and it started working again. Now all this kind of random stuff, but there's seems to be a lot of like water symbolism that for whatever, I guess we have to interpret what that means for our decisions. But we've asked for signs and we're getting them. I guess it depends on who you are and what you do with those symbols. Do you go about your life asking for symbols and signs, or do you kind of internally kind of ask for guidance, or maybe you don't even talk to any of these higher entities?
Oh no, I'm like constantly talking to higher entities, asking for external guidance and help. I assume that whether you want to call that God or whatever it is people pray to, just because it's really nice to be good at your craft or your trade or life in general, but it's nicer to be good at it and have friends on the other side. So it's kind of like having a life insurance policy or a homeowner's policy, which actually brings up what you just mentioned, the interesting water significance to all of this and how it usually follows these waterways and elemental spirits, water, wind, fire. The interesting coincidence that happened recently, and I hate to bring Ryan Skinner into this again, but I'm going to. Not that he has the same name or that is a coincidence, but the interesting thing that happened when he was at the UFO MegaCon here in Nevada, he was in Laughlin, Nevada. I'm in Las Vegas. And he was speaking, and his home back in Wisconsin caught fire, and a portion of it burned down. And what is very interesting is in the very similar time period, this happened right as he went to this UFO MegaCon. And in a very close, within a month, the home I lived in was flooded, and a portion of it was totally trashed. And I had to like live in another home while it got rebuilt. And I just thought, well, that's very coincidental that in the same month, his home would be burned and mine would be flooded. But you can't look into these things. It's just, I think I sent him a text and said coincidence, and he said never. And that was it. It's like,
it'll drive you mad.
It's something you expect.
Yeah, so just to kind of circle back around to Skinwalker Ranch a little bit, but with the digging thing and everything that goes on under the ground, do you have any speculation about why is it so important that people don't dig there? Like, what is below the surface that is so important that these entities are trying to protect it? Any guess?
Really, it's just speculation, theory, and like you said, guesses. And if we are possibly dealing with very powerful elemental forces, which I believe we are, and we are also dealing with very powerful cosmic forces or air forces, things that are seen in the sky, which I think we are. Historically, throughout mankind, the heavens and the earth have always had these areas where different things are seen. So it is it's hard to know for sure, but I think that elemental forces are probably aware of things like drilling for oil, things that are taking place on some of the areas near Fort Duchesne. So I don't know that for a fact, but I would expect that if I were an elemental entity that called that home and used it as my playground, some things I would see as okay and others I may not like. And there are some cases of oil workers, like I mentioned, having very strange things, odds and ends, leaving sandwiches at the end of their shift at the oil rig next to one of my properties. They'll come and do their thing, and they'll leave a sandwich just to not get messed with. Whether or not that means anything, it's probably just hocus pocus and people's own need for feeling okay. But those are dark nights that they're out there checking that stuff. So I don't blame them. It's like your lucky shirt playing baseball.
I want to kind of ask a question around that, because you talk about these sort of supernatural elemental forces that understand that there is some kind of plundering of nature going on. Some people have speculated that the coronavirus is some sort of a fight back tactic from nature. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's hard for me to say. I know some people that work for the World Health Organization, and I know some people that have completely opposing views. So that's one that I'm doing more listening than speaking on at the moment. The fear factor, I do kind of see how mankind is got their tail between their legs, no pun intended, to the Skinwalker thing, but it kind of made us sit there for a minute. We're all kind of, in that fight or flight mode and hunkered down. So I think it's definitely making us realize that we're not in charge.
Yeah.
I don't know if that kind of going along with what you're saying, but yeah, the earth of the elementals for sure.
When it comes to like the elementals, from what I read, they're I guess they're observant, but they're also fairly neutral. I can only relate it to like what happens in Dungeons and Dragons, So they're not evil, they're not good. And it seems like some of the entities at Skinwalker Ranch, not evil, not good, but you do have at least from some of the stories that have been reported at Skinwalker Ranch, like these balls of light and inducing panic in people, do seem to have malicious intent. Do you get a sense out of that, or do you just think it's more of a playful kind of thing and they're just kind of fucking with people?
I like it, it's good and bad. Like you said, a lot of those the blue ones, you don't see them as much anymore. But the blue meanies is what we used to call them. They had that, any light that's in close proximity might scare someone into being very anxious. However, the amber colored ones, for some reason, don't. And I don't know why. Maybe that's just like, why it's a soft light. I don't know. But red means danger. I don't know. There's, if you see a red light, you get more scared than if you see a white light. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that these are definitely intelligently controlled, to the point that a lot of them can't be there. Whether they could be technology, it's a possibility that they're just super micro awesome military drones, which I'm all for. Go Space Force. If they are that kind of toy stuff, I'm all for it. But I have a feeling that there's another aspect as well.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stephen Greer's work and doing his remote or close encounters of the fifth kind work with bringing groups of people out to either the desert or the beach to do like a group meditation to bring in entities that he claims are beings from other galaxies, other star systems. I don't know how he determines that. Are you familiar with his work, and is there any sort of relation to what he is doing in those entities and things at Skinwalker Ranch, or are those two separate things?
Sure. I'm very familiar with his work. I think, the CE5 protocols, or really any ritual or protocol that you use, and his works by far, I won't argue that. But I believe that, to each their own. There are also other methods that work in other cultures, other individuals, other quote unquote people that claim to be able to do this. And it's very interesting that you bring him up, because he's very involved in all this type of stuff, but unwilling, or it's apparently unwilling, to agree to the aspect that there is any malevolent force there, that it's all just, positive. And I think, like you had mentioned, there's positive and negative. And it may be positive and negative forces. It may be the same force that is being positive at one moment, negative at the other. I don't know. And but both are definitely important to the whole aspect. You need the yin and the yang to it. It's usually not just one way.
We get some people that call up here to the show. Teddy Spaghetti, he swears up and down, UFOs are demons. UFOs are demons. I think it's a little simplistic view, but maybe he's not far off that they are just higher entities. Do you consider them demons?
That word.
I know it sounds bad.
Yeah, that's the problem. People don't realize where the word came from. And, it's historical meaning. Instead, they just think, immediately they go to The Exorcist. And, but that's not at all where the word came from. And so with some of these entities that some could call cosmic, especially when they're aerial in nature, these are entities. It's just so funny that we're even trying to classify them at all or put them in a bubble, because obviously their abilities so outweigh ours that it's like a fish that we catch on a stream trying to explain to other fish what happened to him. It's like, I ate this thing. Next thing I know, this being pulled me up, stuck me in a net. He was doing some weird thing, some experiments or something with me, and then I'm back. And I don't know. It really, you hear the cases and the similarities to alien and spiritual experiences. It really is a lot the observer, I believe, and their traits and beliefs that come shining through when they have one of these magic episodes.
Yeah, you mentioned the secret ciphers of the UFOnauts, and it seemed like a lot of stuff he was going through in that book, even like when he mentions Aleister Crowley and the lamb entity that he managed to summon forth is not unlike what Stephen Greer is doing. It's just a different, I guess, mechanism to open up that communication. I view it like if you're trying to make like a call to a website, you have certain protocols you have to do to get to that website. It's just the browsers make it really easy for us. It seems like Aleister Crowley had one set of protocol, and Greer is using a different set of protocols to make these contacts. At this point, you have to assume that the military knows about this stuff. The Pentagon certainly does. I mean, the CIA has its own remote viewing program, or at least it used to. So they have to know about this stuff. And at this point, are they just observing Skinwalker Ranch, waiting for some humans to get eaten to see what happens?
Sorry. So when you say they, do you mean like the CIA?
Yeah, like the people who control the special access projects and really take this stuff serious.
Right. I don't know. And I know that I'm saying that a lot, but I really don't. I would assume that it's an important thing to have a special access program is very important as far as the protocol involved and the people involved and how things move and work. And there's a reason for that. So there's something there. There's something to it. So I that's good enough for me. I haven't gone into questioning why they're doing what they're doing.
I mean, I just imagine they have to have some sort of special group to look into this stuff. I mean, obviously, a couple $1 million was pumped to Bigelow, and somebody read some reports somewhere. And with all the USS Nimitz fallout, they have a new person that is fueling questions at the Pentagon who's just kind of dodging any sort of follow-up questions from the USS Nimitz or any of these things. They're not being very forthright with responding to further inquiries concerning the UFO phenomenon. I sure as hell don't think they're going to talk about demons, at least not on the record. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. You got the HEROparanormal podcast. I'll put links in the description for you, and also links to your Twitter and spacewolfresearch.com. Is there anything else you want to plug, man?
No, that's it. That's great. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Oh, man, I had a blast.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for a few hours, but I'm not going to take up too much of your time. It's a Wednesday.
The chats were digging it. I'll say that right now. The chats were digging it. So thank you so much. Good to meet you.
Yeah, good meeting you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thanks. I'll send you a follow-up email, okay? Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
If you want to join the Slack or Discord, give us an email at ourbigdumbmouth@gmail.com. Check out obdmpod.com for all the social media and donation links. Be a part of the magic.